Hey, what's going on, everybody? Good morning. It is March 20th, Wednesday, March 20th, and we are talking about the news today. All the news that's happening in AI, and we are Jyunmi, Beth. I'm Beth, and Andy is with us. We'll see if anyone else pops in. But there's a ton of news this week, and there's a ton of big moves, really big moves. And I forgot to say, you are listening, watching the Daily AI Show. To people who are joining us live, welcome. We're so happy to have you, and comment so that we can include you in the show. And for people who are listening after the fact, we're so glad that you're there. Maybe give us a nice multiple star rating. We'd love that. Who's got something to start with?
Well,
Andy?
I want to start with just the observation that there was so much this week that I had to make a checklist to make sure that we touched on every one of them, because they're like, I don't know, 8 on my list that are significant and major announcements or developments. So, but I think we have to start off with the really impressive one that occupied a lot of the airwaves among AI aficionados, and that's Devin. The new agent for coding that is truly autonomous and self-directing. In fact, and we talked about it before, actually, but it just occupied a lot of airspace in news this week, and it's a very impressive accomplishment. Anybody want to add anything else on that, or have we already talked enough about Devin?
Well, I think one of the things that is newer about it's not unique, but it's notable about the Devon release. Often we see things that get released, they look incredibly impressive, and then people get access to them and they're like, I don't know. Devon was the opposite. People got access to it and said, wow, it's really early. It does not work all the time, right? Like sometimes it just breaks, and I am still mind blown, super impressed. This is like a huge development and indication of where software development is going.
And to say, put numbers to just how early it is. ChatGPT 4, which is equipped with code interpreter and can do coding, and is also very good at reasoning. It's the benchmark, really. It can go to GitHub and solve open problems that are available there on GitHub with about a 2% completion rate, like a satisfactory solution in coding, self-generated, 2%. Well, Devin goes off on its own and continues to interact with you and gets almost 14% of the tests that are shown on open there on GitHub. Open coding issues that are addressable. It goes and solves those. So that's a big jump in the numbers. I think it's about 7x actually. So
yeah, and I think we should also mention it's a bombshell. You know, huge amount of hype around it. It's a great step forward. It's not the only thing that's out there, right? And there are lots of other open source versions of lesser degree. And I guess it really just depends on how much of a programmer you are. But I think that's the highlight of what Devin could be, is the lower barrier of entry into your programming needs.
Right.
So while there is like GitHub Copilot and these other assistants, this is that next step that we're trying to work towards to a true agent.
Yeah, right. Yeah. We had coding assistance. If you're a programmer, you could get some assistance and validation or correction of your code. Now we have another engineer. Like this is a software engineer on its own going out there, and that's all really what we're anticipating as we march towards artificial general intelligence assistants that are really human in their behavior, human-like, I should say, in their behavior. Okay, now the other big thing that's happening, and is spewing a bunch of different news, is the Woodstock of AI, which is the GPU conference hosted by NVIDIA, which is now the font of all kinds of new developments. And I'll just mention a few of them, unless you guys have one of the things that came out. Okay, so coming from that, you've got the announcement of a brand new GPU. So we've talked on this show about a number of GPU advancements from the Groku, GROQ, large language model focused processing unit, which is very fast when using, a generative AI model. They're still faster than what NVIDIA just came out with, but NVIDIA's advancing dramatically. They announced the Blackwell or B100 line of GPUs, which have about a 2x improvement in speed and capability, although it's many more times on certain types of problems that are run through a GPU. But that's the new Hopper the old one's the Hopper. That's the H100. The new one's the Blackwell, and it's got about a 2x improvement. Sounds small, doesn't it? But that's massive compared to what the Hopper was already doing. And then they announced this GR00T initiative, GR00T. Announce it as GR00T, which is a whole vertically integrated platform for the development of humanoid robots. Special GPUs that are designed for that expressly, new architectures to make that possible, and new language models for interactions with those. So, you've heard about Figure and OpenAI and what they're doing as a collaboration. Now, NVIDIA is going at it from the hardware and the software side in a sort of a systematic approach to the development of advanced humanoid robotics. So that's very cool.
So one of the other one of the other themes of the stories is the silos that you think, right? Like, you are my partner. We are partners for life. We don't do anything with anybody else. That was so not true this week. So, one of the stories of that, or one of the pieces that came out about that, is that leading robotics people and companies partnering with NVIDIA to leverage GR00T do include Figure, right? So Figure just did the OpenAI, but they're also doing NVIDIA. And Agility Robotics, Apptronics, Sanctuary AI, and Unitree. And if you listen to our Monday show, there are some of those companies will be familiar. So
yeah, and it just shows evidence of how important and ahead of the game the NVIDIA accomplishment of GPU marketplace is. I mean, there's a clustering around NVIDIA by the software companies now. Why? Because in the present time, despite the existence of chips like the LPU that Grok brought forward, despite the existence of those, NVIDIA has the design and the mass to make things happen today. And everybody's dependent on NVIDIA GPUs to really operate a sort of a global scale large language model or any other sort of high performance computing architecture to support those applications.
Right.
They're really building a development platform for the development of AI and related technologies like robotics.
Right.
And that's my main takeaway from the keynote. It's like, okay, they're adding in their hardware. They've added in all of these partnerships. Like Jensen was just going through a litany of all the big players, AWS on multiple levels, Microsoft on multiple levels, Google, all of these different types of companies out there. And, and he really highlighted a part of where it's like, he laid out a vision of, hey, we want to partner with everything. Just like you were saying, Beth, we want to partner with everyone so that we have this infrastructure essentially to help build up an entire platform, a whole development platform. So that was my main takeaway from the entire keynote.
I heard on another podcast that Another one. I heard another podcast that Jensen Huang, the guy who is the lead of this, made a very smart bet about 10 years ago to shift his company, which was focused on graphics processing units still, but was focused on the gaming market, so gaming consoles and other PCs that would use their GPUs for gaming. He decided to go all in on AI before it was really a big thing. And now he's developed over those 10 years a sufficient lead that this podcast was saying that they had seen an interview. So it's like a really recursive delivery of this. You will not expect to see another company like AMD or any of the other chip designers / fabricating companies. Now, NVIDIA doesn't actually fabricate their own. They don't do chip fabs. They just do the design and architecture. So that's sort of the advanced research that does it. But they are at least 5 years ahead of anybody else coming in and entering in a meaningful way in the GPU market. Okay. Now, the other thing, following your comment, Beth, about the sort of the promiscuity of of everything that's going on in AI.
That has a negative connotation. We prefer polyamory here.
No, but we're talking about
love who you love.
Right? No, we're talking about seeding the future. Sorry, I had to go there. Okay. Apple, we've been awaiting the major internal developments of Apple that'll find their way onto the iPhone. And they decided to partner with Google's Gemini. That was amazing. Like I thought they were going to come forward with something that was coming out from Apple Research and the huge war chest they have to do invention. I thought there would be something amazing. And it's still possible, right? It could be that they're partnering to deliver something immediately using Gemini from Google. But eventually you'll see that replaced by something that's Apple. Just like they used Intel chips for a long time, and then they made their own chip, right? So anyway, Apple.
Yeah, I think Apple's in an interesting place of catch up. The MM1 research paper announcement was fantastic, but again, that is a research paper. And I was watching a video from a TikToker I follow, Nate. Don't know his last name. But he's a project, project manager, and he had an interesting take on this where he was talking about how Apple had always used their hardware as a negotiation method with companies. So, like Google currently pays them $20 billion to have Google as their primary search method on iDevices. But now this is sort of like a reversal where because they are behind and they may have released research to kind of keep them in the news cycle, but because they're working with Google and Microsoft in bringing, their AI onto the iPlatform, they've kind of reversed it. But I'm hopeful, like you said, Andy, that we'll see something down the line. They're just trying to tread water and stay relevant so they don't lose more traction.
I think what they've got is an issue where all Android phones are naturally or natively connected to Google in that way. And so they have to at least reach parity with what's going to be offered on Samsung phones and others very quickly. Okay, now I'm going to turn this one over to you guys because this is a big one. This is the founder and his associate and partner plus 70 employees from Inflection just became Microsoft's AI leadership.
Yeah. And all right. So the Inflection has Pi, right? That has been their main thing. And we have talked about Pi a couple times on the show. And I have a ton of questions about this and concerns, but the first sort of lens for this is that this was what was happening when Sam was fired, right? So like he and Greg were going to go and become Microsoft AI, and they were going to take a ton of employees with them because Sam had a whole like long tail of people with him. It does not sound like this is a similar kind of situation. I do not believe that Mustafa Suleiman was fired. I think this was just an amazing opportunity.
But I did read that it could be that Pi, as impressive as it is. Now remember, Mustafa Suleiman was the founder of DeepMind, which became the kernel in Google and developed transformer architecture. So that is really, he's like Moses of the AI world. And he has, by the way, I want to put a prop in there for his book, which I listened to on Audible, but it's totally worth listening to.
The Coming Wave? Is that the...
And yeah, that's right. I think that's right. I can never remember the titles because I try to remember what the content is.
I'm going to fact check myself.
We'll post that. The Mustafa Suleiman book is totally a necessary read for anybody involved in AI. So DeepMind, then he started Inflection, which arguably is the leader in empathic, ethical AI interaction with voice. It is far beyond the others. Now, it may not have ever reached a level of adoption that showed it to be valid as an independent company. So that may have been why the appeal was, irrefutable for Mustafa and his, I forget who his partner is. Find her name anyway. Very important person in this process. But anyway, those two are now under the aegis of Microsoft. And Microsoft then, in effect, probably has access to Pi and all of that. Well, naturally, even though Pi is going to remain an independent company over there, Inflection, there's going to be a natural partnership between Microsoft and Pi. And then you have the people who built it working inside Microsoft, and they will accomplish another jump beyond what Pi was able to do, probably inside the new heavily funded initiative that is the strategic initiative for Satya Nadella. Did I get the wrong guy? No, I'm confusing Google.
No, Satya is in fact Microsoft. You're good.
Okay. It's a big dance card, and I have a hard time following it. But anyway, this is a major, major move, and it really is. I'm observing a major transformation of Microsoft at the same time.
Yes.
And we are, as a team, really jumping into the Microsoft Copilot environment and ecosystem, because it's going to be one of the most advanced and practical ways to implement tools and automations and generative AI inside corporations. Just a natural combination of, safety and security, data management, all the pieces and parts that are necessary for operating effectively are going to be delivered by Microsoft. And if you're already using Microsoft Office 365, it's just a natural on-ramp for that. So as I mentioned in one of our Slack channels, I'm glad a few months ago I added a little bit of Microsoft to my portfolio before even this happened.
Right. It is one of the things that I am watching for this, however, is that Pi was part of the services that were designed to be your confidant, your coach, like they were not worried about developing a personal relationship with Pi, but intending to develop a personal relationship with Pi. And we are seeing this. We saw this, I think, with Replicate, maybe. We're seeing the startup like risk of that. So I am not a heavy Pi user. because Pi tended to interrupt me and I talk. I think when I talk, so I pause. That does not mean you go now. They fix that. You can now like hit the button that says don't talk until I hit this button. But is this another example of creating something where people have developed personal relationships, have emotional and maybe even psychological connections to something that is no longer going to be updated, right? Like it does not sound like it's coming down, but the focus is not on that. It's on the API side.
So I guess that's my main question for the two of you. I don't use Pi often either, except for, when we were reviewing it or whatnot. But is this going to be devastating to them? Because the core leadership and development is gone. What's going to happen? What's going to happen with them? What do you foresee?
Devastating to Pi.
Yeah, devastating to Pi.
Yeah. I think Pi is going to be absorbed.
Yes.
Just the concept of Pi and what Mustafa Suleyman and his partner in crime, Karen Simonian, it's important that we use her name because she is on the marquee in every announcement and every discussion that Mustafa has.
Right. Co-founder.
Those two are hip to hip on all of the things that they've done collectively in their sort of professional life together. So they're a pair in my mind. So I have to remember the name. Remember when I'm giving kudos to Mustafa that it's actually Karen who needs to be mentioned in the same breath.
Yeah.
Okay. So I believe it will eventually emerge as a feature set of Microsoft's platform pilots. Right? It's not going to have its own independent existence necessarily because just how disruptive it must be for so many important players from a development entity like DeepMind DeepMind went to Google. Here's Inflection, in effect, an acqui-hire of the entire, intellectual property of it.
Right.
Not necessarily the legal intellectual property of the company Inflection, and I'm not sure why. We'll probably see emerge over the next days, what the actual legal structure is of Pi's Inflection company. What restrictions are there on the team from Pi doing something similar? Do they have a set of curbs around which they can't, enter into while they develop at Microsoft? It's not clear.
Yeah. You think this is possibly an acquisition in piecemeal?
Probably, yeah. Just because of how devastating the loss of the core team is by having them move over to Microsoft. What do you do with the remaining intellectual property? Do you sell it off? The entity Inflection. What do you do with it? Probably the best buyer for that is Microsoft.
So up and down.
As part of their acqui-hire, they can gratify the shareholders in some way. The shareholders.
Right. And we said it was very much like what was happening when Sam was fired. But of course, OpenAI is a nonprofit. And so acquiring the nonprofit that you've invested in is a much more complicated thing, even if people have been fired and quit.
It doesn't make sense. You can't own a nonprofit. Right? So,
and anyway, if you could, you kind of already do, right? Like you could, you've done as much in that direction.
You own the important parts of it, which is the operation and the anyway. Moving along, I think it's important to point out that Elon Musk, a major player on the field out there, he open sourced the Grok GROK large language model, which is like it's aligned with his antagonism towards OpenAI at this point, and his mysterious ways, and making his LLM open source. He's basically thumbing his nose at OpenAI for going closed, in effect.
Right.
That's part of this tit for tat kind of thing that's played out on the battlefields of Twitter converting to X with an enormous investment by Elon Musk, and lots of other ways that someone empowered with and entitled by an outrageous degree of wealth, can really manipulate, everything on the field, anything on the field, including going.
And how limited that is, right? Because
True.
Grok doesn't make Grok function better. Although when you open source something, people come in and do make your product better. Maybe that's a part of the thing. But it's not like this was coupled with more function or more satisfaction. Like there's another level of Grok. So we open source the previous one. Grok still seems like a vanity project. In it like a multi-billion-dollar vanity product, which is not the first, right? I mean, like you sort of look at a bunch of Musk investments and things in that direction. All right.
Okay, we can't avoid and shouldn't avoid mentioning that EU passed their AI rules. And so there is a major organization of nation states that has made a decision about protections for humanity around AI and regulation of the development of AI. And so I don't know the particulars of that, but that was released and that was big news. It was overshadowed, I think, by a lot of these players on the field, maneuvering and throwing long passes and so on. That was more news, grabbing, but EU has published their rules. So that probably took a lot of people a lot of time to generate those regulations and then pass them in the EU sort of government structure.
Right. Yeah, we basically it's a done deal. They just have some rules of order that they have to finish by publishing them by a certain date in their methods or whatnot. But the main broad strokes of what the act covers is the limitations for surveillance, the use of AI in surveillance and identification, and some of some more consumer protections, essentially. But it is a great basis or framework for other nations and other groups to model whatever kind of laws that they want to, legislation that they want to develop around AI, which is been sorely lacking up to this point. So it's a great step towards that general regulation and protections for people. There is a ton of other stories to go over. Luckily, this week is our recap show, right? So we can always go more into that. But I did have two small stories that I wanted to cover, and make sure that they got a little bit of love. Yesterday, the University of Geneva released a paper of their findings. They were able to teach one AI a set of tasks to do, right? That's normal. But then that AI was then able to instruct another AI to perform them. And it's that key thing there. That's the communication between the two. And that's the big jump, I think.
Right.
Because we're talking about agents being able to go out and perform their own task, analyze something and do that. But this is the component that shows how AIs can communicate with each other and disseminate a set of instructions to other AI. Right? We haven't really seen
I have a very important factoid that everybody will need to know here about human intelligence.
Yeah.
So, did you know that humans are the only intelligent mammal that actually teach their young?
Mm.
And every other animal, the learning is done by observation and mimicry. But humans actually pursue pedagogy, which is the practice of teaching their offspring. Well, you just told me that artificial intelligence is being trained to do exactly that, to teach another AI what it knows. And that is part of human intelligence, and it's part of artificial general intelligence, which we're comparing obviously to human intelligence, and general intelligence in that way. So yeah, only humans actually teach their young.
I'm not sure I agree with that, but that's not a thing. Jyunmi,
well,
keep going.
It's amazing. Other young learn from their parents, but they're not taught deliberately by their parents. They're not shown how to do something except by observing them doing it, right? But we'll actually sit down and practice something and have an objective. We're an agent that has an objective of teaching our offspring what to do.
I'm thinking of like little lions pouncing on their pouncing on their parents.
Jane, I will share with you elsewhere.
That's cool.
Share with research.
AI conversations can go anywhere.
Right.
Jyunmi, what do you got?
Okay, and so my last little story is Ubisoft gave some extra access to one of the reporters for The Verge, and allowed them to assess Ubisoft's new Neo NPC. So, if anybody doesn't know, Ubisoft is a major game manufacturer, and I know we've talked about in the past where one of the great things that an LLM can provide is to provide a more dynamic and interactive experience. And so Ubisoft, they love to try the latest and greatest things. So so they're designing, and they have a prototype of these Neo NPCs which can hold conversations. So if you're interested in where the development of human AI interaction can be, gaming, and those things along those lines, you might want to check out that story. There's a little bit of a video of them interacting, and this is all voice talking. So you're not choosing your dialogue. You say something, and the NPC is reacting to what you say within, of course, their character parameter. But that means they're going to act like how they're supposed to act as an entity, right?
Right.
They have their character, and you're going to interact with it. I think this is going to be huge on just so many levels, and may develop even into a whole new genre or subgenre of gaming / entertainment / media and things like that. Because we've talked about, there's been a push for interactive media for years, and some have been great experiences, some have not, but this is from what I'm seeing here, this is a great example of, I can see the road ahead, and I think it will be very entertaining at the least.
Yeah. That's amazing. We have not talked about, and we are going to end. We have not talked about, but we do know that it happened. The Lex Friedman interview with Sam Altman, and there are a couple of key quotes from that. One of them is that in comparison to GPT-5, GPT-4 sucks. Right. He's been trying to find different ways of saying, we're going to blow your minds. Compared to 5, 4 is going to look like 3 compared to 4. And of course, 3 was worse than 3.5. We went from 3.5 to 4 and our mind was blown. Right. So it's a Lex Friedman interview. So it's very, very long, but also very, very worth it. So thank you so much. If we miss news stories,
I have to add the last one, which is so important. The Kingdom of Saudi Arabia's Public Investment Fund announced a $40 billion fund in partnership with Andreessen Horowitz to advance AI in the Arabic world.
And that is the largest government investment
It dwarfs most fund sizes for VCs. So
Yeah.
So it's huge. It's huge. 40 billion to entrepreneurial and startups in the Arabic world.
It's amazing. It's so good. And so thank you. That wraps our new show. If we forgot something, please let us know. We actually already know, but we will come back. Yes, on Friday when we'll do our wrap-up show of what we talked about in the last 2 weeks. Tomorrow, AI hype versus reality, and Jyunmi's getting us started with the splash screen. Thank you so much, everybody. This has been Beth, Jyunmi, and Andy out.
Aloha.